before that, I would just like, you to introduce yourself more. Because to me, right, like, before we start to enter into your perspective on things, it would be just good to get a kind of an introduction to your to your history or to your perspective or something like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because to me, like, well, you're a unique individual.
You know that I'm also a Western astrologer, so I investigate astrologies.
So before you continue, when did you start studying Western astrology?
Age 11. 44 right now, 45
So
in
that's 33 years ago.
33.
So why or how did you start? Like, what drew you to it, or what was your first memory of that? Like, why? How did it start, basically?
What caught my attention at first of all, I was fascinated by mythology. Both of my parents, they have this kind of a literature background. They are teachers, and so this in this sense, I was fascinated by Greek mythology when I was a little kid. And when I saw that there was this that these Greek myths were alive in the planets, that was the other part of the magic. So I said, I remember there was one. My mother, she's a French teacher, and I remember one. She had one student. She came one day with two books in her hands. One was the Kybalion, and the other was Astrology as an Occult Science by Oscar Adler. Those are deep books, and I was 11 years old, and she gave me both. She kind of saw something, I'm sure, and I remember that the Kybalion was too metaphysical for me. I kind of didn't, even today, those books, I recognize that I'm not interesting because my head starts to ache. It's like I feel this. No, this is, and I use it as a physical control for everything. If my head says no, it's kind of physical thing that I have not to think about a certain subject. And she offered me this other book, Astrology is an Occult Science, a wonderful book. And then many coincidences. Like I remember I was not very good at math, and I had to go to a private teacher, and this private teacher was also an astrologer, and so we ended up speaking about astrology instead of mathematics, and he gave me some other information, some other books. So I studied in a kind of an autodidactical way. I did myself. But one thing that is always important is to learn in groups and to learn things with other people, because otherwise this knowledge will can lead you astray in many aspects. And mostly in parts of your life when you have to get in touch with reality, not avoid reality. Because,
That was very fascinating that you had your mother supported you and also a teacher supported you, at such a young age. That's very yeah, that's very fascinating.
in this sense, this road was there was also this cultural aspect of studying mythology and astrology that is in our culture, in Western culture, is very present, and you can see it even in if you go to ancient churches and you see the 12 symbols of the zodiac. So but and then I started to learn some in a place called Casa Once here in Argentina, very good astrological kind of faculty, or a place to study astrology, 4 years. And that has also been a great experience because I've shared this knowledge with different people, And well, it's always present. Even if in some moments in my life I want to say, no, I'm done with that, it comes back again. It's like a wave. It comes back again because there are also new techniques, new things to interpret, new ways of understanding the planets. So in many aspects, I see myself as a researcher. And when in 2004 I got this first contact with the Mayan calendar, with this book, and I remember that it didn't say anything, for instance, about the difference of the different nahuals, and then the numbers, and like 2-ish or 9 can. And I remember by reading the book, first I had a powerful insight. I said, I'm 9 can. And later on, I discovered that I was 9 can. But when I read because it didn't sound right to me that the numbers didn't mean anything. In the book of these barrios, this secret is not revealed. And I said, well, there are some things that are interesting. And later on, this is 2008, 2009, 2008. I get in touch with Fabian or Pabian. He used to date an old high school friend of mine. We're talking about something else, 20, 30 years ago, or 20 something years ago. And I was like, hey, Fabian, I'm Federico. I'm a Western astrologer. I think that you are into this other type of astrology. Maybe we can exchange point of views and so on. And he answers me back and with this very powerful text explaining me the conditions of my birth. And that was mind-blowing. And I said, well, there's something big here. And we started to... And I started to learn of him all these other things that had to do with the power of intervention, because the problem of Western astrology is that Western astrology lost its contact with the possibility of magic, the possibility of intervene in a certain situation. It's like, okay, you have a transit of Saturn. God help you, friend. And I guess this is not a good position. And I think that this position has been lost in the Inquisition, in the 1600s, 1700s. The magic related to astrology has been lost in the way. And now we see it not only in the horoscopes. I'm talking about Western astrology, of course. And if you compare it with the Mayan understanding that is a homogeneous mix of both things, of a way of relating, a way of intervention, a way of understanding. It has not been broken. Hello?
Yeah, I can hear. That's very fascinating, and I don't want to get too off track, I guess, but maybe we'll address this because it's kind of interesting. And I can't explain this because I do not understand astrology at all. But it had something to do with the Indian astrology is following the sky as it is in the night, whereas the Western astrology was following the sky as it was, or something like that. Can you explain that? Or do you know what I'm talking about?
I'm going to try to, maybe there are two things. It's true that the Indian astrology or Vedic astrology is, I'm not an expert, not at all, but I know that it's mainly based on a moon astrology. So they have these 28 mansions of the moon, and this implies a different way of dividing the sky in 28. The moon is particularly important, and you also start to the positions in the sky that and I think this is what you're saying, is that you connect 23 degrees before. So you put all the, for instance, if you are were you Cancer or Pisces? I don't, or Libra, I don't remember.
If I was to follow my Western astrology, it's right on the edge of Scorpio and the Libra.
Scorpio and Libra, yes. You have to go back 23 degrees, all the different positions, but also you have a very different way of understanding, because astrology will always show the values of a culture. So, because astrology is in a certain, is part of a culture. So it's not the same to be, let's see, independence is not seen in the same way in a more traditional society than in a more progressive society. So certain placements will be judged in a way that is different from one place to another.
That's actually very fascinating, which does also apply to the Mayan calendar, just in terms of rural versus urban.
Absolutely.
Right? Like if you're in a rural setting, well, following astrology or following the sky and the sun and the moon is very much part of your profession. You're doing agriculture and you need to watch carefully, for your job, basically. Whereas in an urban setting, not so much, and maybe you need to watch it for different reasons.
You start to connect with the planets, not in a direct relationship, as if they were in nature, but you know where they are, but you don't feel them. And the process of feeling the planets, feeling nature, is a very important thing in order to make. I love this concept from the Mayan world, the Nabal. The Nawal Noh, if we go in directly, it's not about mind only, it's about mind and body, mind and perception. They can be together, and they should, and in fact they are together. And this has to do with the other way, what you do. You have intellectual information, but you have spiritual perception. And you should play with both, because it's all part of the whole gamma of colors in order to paint and to give back to the one who asks you something, to the consultant, something that is powerful. In my way of understanding, I'm always into that direction. If it's not powerful, it's I don't like it. If it has to, you have to go for the KO. You have to go for the, and in order to do that, there are many things that you need. Information is okay, but we in a society that's the one we lived in, that is with too much information. We need information plus sensitivity plus perception plus some sort of delirium. Everything might help in order to portrait or give the to give magic to the situation.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying in terms of the different what aspects or approaches are. I think they're part of a whole system, and each part is not complete without the complementary other parts. Coordinated together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's basically a full-ass approach rather than a half-assed approach. And then in your case, your own personality goes into, okay, let's do a KO. Because, well, that's just coming from the heart,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. It's being sincere with myself. But another thing that is kind of funny is that when you start adding astrologies in, the thing gets very complicated. In Western astrology, I'm a Gemini, but in this Vedic astrology, I'm a Taurian. And in this in Japan, in Chinese astrology, I'm a snake. Fortunately, here in Mayan astrology, I'm also a snake. But you can see different aspects of yourself. How are they treated in the under the light of the different civilizations and cosmovisions? In this sense, I like to think myself as someone who loves to understand the this researching aspect of astrology. I'm in touch with the subject. I'm in touch with the idea of destiny. I'm in touch with the idea of mission. I'm in touch with the idea of the colors of the time, and the time is not the same, and that there are qualities there, and these qualities might define situations. And this is something that you see in every big culture, and in sometimes it's a very hidden aspect. The other day, not the other day, some months ago, I bought some books of Chinese astrology, and they have all this understanding of the of stars that is much more complicated than the 12 animals. I remember once I have an anecdote on Chinese astrology. I started in 1994. I went with my father, 12 cat, and we started to learn a language that we didn't speak. And so we went for Chinese. So we went to this teacher. The teacher was very, I don't know how to say it, but she said to my father, your son speaks better than you. And she said to me, your father writes better than you. So she was building this competition. And one day I started speaking about Chinese astrology, and she said that the important thing was to get in connection with the animal and see what is the animal doing. And she said, my husband, he's a tiger, but he was born during the night. And the tiger, what is the tiger doing in the night? He's hunting. So he had to come here to Argentina and working and so on. But the best friend of my husband, he's also a tiger, but he was born at noon. So what's the tiger doing? He's sleeping, and his life here in China is very easy. You see, that anecdote was great, of showing something very, very elementary about what's the animal doing, and you have it's your power animals, the animal that you resonate somehow with in that culture. You see?
I like that idea of really considering the cultural lens aspect, when trying to approach astrology, because so many of these different symbols mean very different things in different contexts.
Mm-hmm.
And especially, I wanted to get to this, but the snake, the snake in the Western culture is traditionally and is very negative, as well as a dragon too, but that's another, thing. But the snake is, I remember my grandmother was like terrified of snakes. She couldn't even be near one. If she saw a little garden snake in her garden, she would just run away. And it was really, she had a very biblical
Mm-hmm.
reaction to the idea of a snake and sort of this symbol of a counterflow, which is ironic actually. But anyways, a symbol of something that's an adversary. So and then of course you get into the Chinese culture, where a snake could be the luckiest, a lucky rabbit's foot. Like a snake could be very good luck. I know here in Japan, certain snakes are considered very positive omens.
Mm-hmm.
And in China and in other places too, right? And so and probably in the Mayan lands as well, they have a much different cultural context to the symbols, and then so their way of reading them uh, is outside of our imagination, because we're in such a different culture that we can't even, the metaphors are completely almost irrelevant to us sometimes.
Absolutely. Well, in this sense, if you think in Western astrology, you don't have the snake, but you don't have snake directly, but you have the snake in the sign of Scorpio. And Scorpio, you met everyone of Scorpio, and they have this strange feeling. Oh, he's a Scorpio, beware! And you have this kind of. I think that we're living in a world today, in this world in 2020. In 1990 was nothing the same, but everyone knows a little bit about astrology. I always say that when I was a kid, I had to convince people of astrology, and now the new generations are already convinced. I don't know of what they are already convinced, but you don't have to say, hey, listen, look, there's this thing and there's this. They are already in an astrologists, and I will speak in general, are getting powerful and much more powerful these days. In that sense, it's very important to be fair, to recognize the limits, but I also think that it's a very important moment for everyone who's in this path of living this age of wisdom, in a sense.
Well, in my case, I've never really been interested in astrology, and I'm very aware that it exists, and I'm also aware that people use it, and some people are very experienced at it, and other people aren't. There's various degrees of skill and so forth. And study and stuff. But other than that, I just don't know what to do with it. I've never really known what to do with it, and so I just sort of see it. It's there. It's part of the landscape of things that are in the world. But I don't know. There was something about it that just I'm aware of it, and sometimes when I hear somebody like you talking about it, I'm very curious to hear from your perspective what's going on with this or that factors in the situation. But yeah, I'm not sure, like well, anyways, yeah, I just don't know what to do with it.
You're already in a certain cosmovision, in a certain way of understanding that is the Mayan calendar, that is already powerful enough. I use both. I have to say, I'm always in connection of what's going on with the sun. Basically, the sun and the moon is touching. It's in Taurus. In a couple of days, will be in Gemini. Which things are going to get faster. Things are going to speed up. This is kind of the biorhythm that Western astrology gives. Is also very powerful. And it's also the way that a majority of people are, because it's the majoritarian astrology that we have. But the Mayan calendar shows us another way of cutting the reality, and this is a very, very interesting way of doing things too. In personal life, I've seen that already, that I have 3 or 4 meetings on day 5. And that, as you know, and the audience will, the day 5 Nawal Hob has to do with the overwhelming power of the water. And I've seen already that we have major discussions, angry discussions on those days. And when I had to, pick up meetings, I tried to not to put them on day 5. And this is something that I use from a Mayan calendar. Something, if I had to use a similar idea on Western astrology, I will not pick, I don't know. Sometimes moon in Aries can be very bold, and you can have this type of angry discussions. but Nahual hope is very, very strong.
That's really funny that you say that, because I have a friend who does the same thing, but instead of Nawal Hove, he avoids Nawal Khan. And whatever the activity is, he goes, there's a counterflow. I can't, sorry. And he will avoid, like, I think it's ridiculous. But it goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the conversation. The different situations affect different people differently. So in my case, I don't really notice anything unusual about a Nawalkan day. I mean, there's some Nawalkan energy there, but that sometimes is very, very helpful in what you're trying to do that day. So then I don't consider it to be something to be avoided. And maybe it's my nature, or maybe it's because I'm a novice still. But Nawal number 5, again, maybe like I said before, I'm sort of an agent of chaos. So I consider number 5 is my big hammer, you know. It's hammer time. And so on those days, that would be when I would plan more meetings or something.
Well,
you see what I mean?
I see your point. This has a lot to do with the way you tend to live. For instance, I did some major works at home, and we have a problem, and the job didn't start on the day that it was planned, and it started on 3 Imosh, and we have problem over problem over problem. So in this aspect, even if the Nahuatl point of view would give you some extra helps, this is the way that you can use knowledge. If you don't use that knowledge, you can go with this idea of, it's true that something in some other place it will balance, there will be a counterbalance of the situation. It's true, but sometimes it's also true that there are things that you don't want to live. And if this is my way, that's a very nine way of doing things. Avoiding situations is very typical from an hour 9.
Sometimes I will avoid Nawal Toch if it's like a really bad day, you know, like I have to make a confrontation. Well, maybe not on Toch. I'll do something like that.
Okay. Maybe not.
Yeah, or yeah. But that's a good example in my personal case. Not to say that I think Toch is a bad day or anything, but if there is a sensitive thing, well, maybe I can do it tomorrow.
Well, it's true that the way that the cat see things is the way you ponder situations is somehow different, and I can see why you can have kind of a more equanimous way of doing one thing or another. But it's true that the quality of time will be present in a certain day. You might not know exactly what will show up, and that's sometimes the problem of that we as astrologers in a broad sense we tend to face, because sometimes we don't interpret correctly the energies of the day, or we don't see clearly what's sometimes right in front of us.
Yeah, that gets back to my sort of agent of chaos thing, where I always feel like there's always some factors that we can't see, which are part of the equation at the end of the day. And so even we can see all this stuff, and it's very helpful, you know, the map is not the road. It's just a representation of the road. The road is the road. You know, and even though the weather report says it's going to be bad, maybe it's not true. And I always sort of have that consideration in anything.
That speaks. It's clear that speaks a lot about you, and that speaks a lot about Nawal 3. That it's your main Nawal. I mean, these are concerns that the idea of being hiding away from situations has really nothing to do with this way, this joy of Nawal 3, of expanding itself. I'm going to pick here, 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 because somehow in the knowledge of Nawal 3 is that they will get to Nawal 4. I mean that something naturally will stop the whole thing. And then we start, and then we continue.
That's a fascinating observation, to see the impulses as sort of a chain. You know, it's, I have my own personal impulse, and but that's actually connected to a longer line of steps.
There's another thing that is important. If you do it all the time, you might go crazy, and that this has been the problem of all the astrologers throughout life. Everything was kind of a taboo. Don't do this thing here, do this thing in this moment, not in this moment. And then time became a kind of a jail. So this is not a good position to be always in kind of in a fearful connection with time, that in fact is a fearful connection with life. This is something that
and ultimately this is not true. If you test it, you'll see that that's wrong. But people get stuck in their mind. You're right, though. Mm-hmm. Time becomes a prison like that, and I've seen it in every tradition, actually, too. I don't want to call the Mayan calendar system an astrology, but in some ways it's very similar. They contradict each other, or they sometimes they are opposite to each other, so or so forth. And so then, how do you reconcile these two systems?
Sometimes I used to use like the metaphor of the way you cut the cow. In the US, and I guess in Canada too, there are certain types of way of cutting the beef that is not the same as we do it here, or the way they do it in Brazil. So the cow is the same, but the cut is different. So you won't get the way of cutting reality is different, and keeping that in mind is the way that I mix both things. It's something that I think that they might be in a connection in a certain way, but they are pointing to different directions, and I don't hold I don't have attention in that thing. I see how they connect and how they can live, but they are talking about different things.
Yeah, this to me makes you a very fascinating individual. This combination.
I guess maybe if you have a certain toleration with cows, I have a toleration with ambiguity, So it might mean this, it might mean this other thing. And in this sense, I can guide it always. The strength and the force of the will always be my way of recognizing which way. So if today I want you to understand as a 7tzikin day, it would be a different way of understanding as a Taurus moon and Sagittarius day. Today we see that this the day of a certain harvest. We see that today might be a day of a. We've been waiting lots of time for doing this chat, and we're having it on 7tzikin. How I'm going to interpret this fact, because
that's amazing too. Yeah, that's amazing. Good.
A long time, and this is the moment. This is the moment that I'm speaking about astrology on the radio, and I haven't done this in years and years. So it's also the way you ponder the situation and say, maybe this is a very important day, and we are doing a very important thing that has a lot to do with the essence of the engendration process of what does tzikin mean. A very powerful now, while the eagle, I was the other day, today I was, walking the dog, and I see 3 major hawks in the park in Buenos Aires, and I said, oh la la, maybe this is pointing towards something. The beautiful thing about Mayan calendar astrology is the way that gives you poetic perspective into your life, because generally people do not have a way of pondering time. So everything is the same. And there's a way of seeing things as the same, like obviously the Saturday and Sunday are different from the rest of the day, and that's the major the way we divide time in our society,
Well, that's one thing that's really fascinated me is the 7-day week is basically a human universal, except in the Mayan world. And this whole idea of a 20-day week that they have is extremely unique. I mean, it's not just the Mayan world; it actually goes all into the different parts of North America and into South America. And so it's, but it is totally different.
Mm-hmm.
And it, one analogy there's lots of ways you can describe it. I really like your cow analogy, by the way. I always love it when you say that. But it's like, if you are an expert painter, and you really appreciate different types of paint, and so when you walk into a very well painted hotel or something, you can touch the walls and really have a deep appreciation for, wow, look at this color. This
Mm-hmm.
paint is the very expensive kind and very rich and luxurious. And of course, a normal person just walks right past it. But because you have this experience, the eyes of a painter, you can appreciate the walls and the amount of work that it really took a very, a skilled person to do it. And so then we develop the eyes to see the richness of time. And so, for example, in your case, if you see the 3 hawks, well, all of a sudden now that's not just 3 birds randomly. It has a context, and it has maybe even a message, and it could be read, and it just becomes much, much, much richer. So that's really what it is done for me in my life, in every single day.
Absolutely. And this is what we have to offer sometimes to the people that comes to us and ask, because it has been, it's always a very interesting moment when you talk about to some other people destiny, or and this I'm talking about Western astrology, but the moment that you create when you have this consultation, and the position that the consultant has, like this, what are you going to tell me? How do you know these things about me if I haven't speak to you, if I don't even know you? These are the mysterious aspects of what we do, and the information that we have from this sacred knowledge, and obviously the Mayan calendar is absolutely outstanding.
In my experience, I found it was quite unique, the Mayan calendar. But I guess from your perspective, it's similar to other systems, or comparable.
I see perfectly in which ways the Mayan calendar is absolutely unique, and in there's no rival in many aspects, and I'm going to, I'm going to
That's how I feel.
in the aspects that I think that is unique, but Western astrology is a very, very powerful method to understand things. In my opinion, they don't fight at all, at all. No, I have no problem.
I love that. That's amazing for you to say that.
They are.
Sometimes I will hear, I remember when I was young and I would be at a party or at a festival or an event or something, and there would be some, mystical guy talking to the girls about astrology, and the moon and Aries, and I would just come up and I know you have. Well, I don't know, I've never seen it, but I can imagine. And I just come up, with the Mayan calendar and go, here, hold my beer, watch it, and roll up my sleeves and go watch this. And I always thought, I don't want to qualify it as being better, but at least I found it was a lot more to the point or detailed, maybe. But perhaps it's more that it just functions differently. It has a different function. What do you think about that?
I think that if you use your intelligence and your spirit, you will always give someone what he's really looking for. I remember I have a good anecdote when I was coming back from Spain. I was 26. I was kind of in a very I didn't know what to do exactly with my life at that time. And I remember I went to a kind of an expensive astrologer, and I didn't know if I wanted to follow my law studies. And he looked at my chart, in this case, looking at Gemini, Moon in Leo, and so on. And he says, but you have a very good chart for a lawyer. Yes, I said, but I love astrology. I said, yeah. But you can do both things. You're a Gemini. And he gave me this kind of the simplest advice of all, that a Gemini can do many things, and that is absolutely true, and you will see it in many Geminis that you will meet. I said, okay, well, I will do it. And it helped me a lot, because I finished my law studies and I finished my astrological studies at the same time, and they both they didn't. I ended up with the problem of the either or situation. I decided to take the and situation.
I love the and question. It's an amazing solution to many problems.
In this sense, was a very simple thing, a very simple advice, an advice that I already knew because of my knowledge of astrology. But the situation was that the key thing is that someone told me that, and he used that using this Western astrology. I don't think that there's a fight, truly. You can, I can, if for instance, you give me your birth chart and I start to see things in your birth chart, and you give me also the knowledge with the knowledge that I have of the Mayan, and I see it the Mayan way, you will get two different answers, but they will speak to two different parts of you, surely.
I guess we're very complex systems, and so it's not just such a one size fits all approach to fixing our problems.
But the Western astrology has a very good way of touching the certain type of situations of life. The idea of the houses, that is great. The planets and the houses and the aspects that you are, and you can give a one type of answer that would be good. But when you touch the Mayan way, you will crack up something that might be deeper and hidden of the person. This is the way I might see. I always compare this knowledge of the Mayan calendar as grabbing water, holding water in your hands, and you want to go somewhere with the water you have, and then the water is not there anymore. There's an aspect of a very specific sensitivity that is part of the of this deep tradition that is not the way that you act in Western astrology. In Western astrology, or at least the way I feel it, I can speak a little bit more. When I go to Mayan astrology, I will wait until the heart opens the path and I start to unfold the nawals, and I expect the nawals to tell me the story, the way I did with the idea of the three a couple of minutes ago.
Now, this is when you're doing a reading for a person or a situation. I see. Yeah, you know what's really funny is typically when it really comes down to speaking about Mayan things, is I'm usually very private, and I try not to talk. It's a kind of ironic because we're doing a podcast and it's very public, but it's only really public to those who are searching for it or seeking it. You know, and then if you're not seeking it, then this isn't for your ears. Is always kind of how I felt. Because I feel like this topic is too heavy. It goes on and on and on and on and on. And if you really don't have the heart for it, then I don't want to waste your time and my time, because it's too much. It's too much effort to go through it all. You know, if you really don't, and so
yeah, well, this touches the
I really
subject.
keep.
If you want to live or this, or you want to do consultations on a regular basis, I decided not to be a professional astrologer many years ago, and with this I include this Mayan calendar too. I just, when someone asks me, because generally people know that I'm into this, and I say this, and that. Now leave me alone. Then we'll go to some other thing. But
So exactly, yes.
uh, it's true that it's a very dense knowledge, basically because you're speaking about sexuality. You start speaking about the way you were made. This thing that has the Mayan understanding of things.
Man,
Man,
people
this
do
is.
not. Mothers do not want to talk about this stuff. It's so funny. If you have to be really careful if you start to talk about, especially an unpleasant situation. They get so you can see their body language is, and they want to run away, and so then I don't want to be the one to make them run away. So I just better not say anything.
Exactly. You only and you realize that you only have 5 good gestations. The other 15 gestations are not. So that gives you a clue about how things are, you know.
Well, and even beyond that, sometimes the ones with the quote unquote good gestations, these are the most difficult people who have the most difficult lives. And so,
Is that true? Huh? It's true what you're saying. I
right?
love that.
Yeah, and so then like I don't place any favor towards those ones. In fact, I would avoid some of those situations if I could. A spoiled baby is no picnic.
Espadén is no picnic. I take that one. Yeah.
Quote
I
of the
take
day.
that. I will
But
put
it's
that in
true.
my status of the WhatsApp.
Yeah, well, like for example, a good one. I mean, there's lots of them, but like Akmak. Akmak can come from such a troubled situation, and Akmak could be, in many cases, such a sweetheart of a person, a real heart of gold.
Mm-hmm.
And smart and capable, and high functioning. Not the highest, but still very high functioning, and very solid, honest, hardworking, easy to get along with, and so
Definitely.
forth. Yeah, not only Akmak, it could be a number of different novels that have a very possibly troubled pregnancy, but it doesn't necessarily result in a troubled person.
Indeed, indeed. But you see, you're and with that is why in so many our culture is not ready for the Mayan calendar.
That is true. That is 100%. Yeah. Well, you know what though? What I'm trying to do with this podcast and some of these other projects, classes and videos and stuff, is slowly,
Slowly, is the
yeah,
way.
chipping away at it, and year by year, where it's growing, gaining ground,
Absolutely,
you
absolutely.
know. Yeah, I feel less weird talking about it now than I did. How about in your case, or did you always you were very comfortable talking to people about astrology and just people knew you as this person who was just with their head in the stars?
Well, what you're saying about the guy who speaks at the girls about astrology, I used to be
I
that
can
type of
imagine.
guy. Uh, because
With
mainly
the
because I was
guitar too, right?
fascinated by astrology. This is the main thing. You're
It's honest. Yeah, you
fascinated.
do have an honest fascination. It's not an act. It's real.
No, it's an honest fascination. But I have been it's something that you want to kind of evangelize everyone. It's like the guy who stops smoking, quit smoking, and he says that I'm going to tell you about the truth. And well, the same thing happens with astrology. You see everyone that doesn't believe in something that you deeply love, and you start to say to other people. And you have to say that mainly that the female is more like a female interest. It's something that I've seen. Generally, the women are interested in
Women are
this.
way more interested in this stuff. Absolutely, I agree with that.
It's that way. It's true that you find sooner or later you have this kind of the rational, the guy that we want to say, well, let me try to understand your point of view, and then I have the rational chat. Okay, I tell you with it. But in fact, I'm more in connection with this. Oh, this is wonderful attitude that the women tend to have with this, because it's the one I have.
Well,
Eh,
because women naturally, generally speaking, they they're willing to allow this. They're like,
Absolutely.
oh yeah, of course that could be. They don't need to understand it for it to be allowed to be right, or to be allowed to be to be useful, or to be allowed to be interesting. Whereas, a lot of men will think, well, if I don't understand it, it can't be true.
Hmm.
And that will be their basic starting position in many things. And yeah, so women tend to be open. Oh yeah, of course that's allowed to be real, or that's allowed to be true. Women have different things that are even if they can't understand it, it's allowed to be true. Oh, of course, and then they're much more open.
Sometimes it's the flavor. I have to in this sense would have to be critical on the men attitude towards this, because it's it, I don't know why I have to critical,
Well,
but
I think it's a cultural thing though, because
it's a
here in
cultural
Asia,
thing.
yeah, in Asia it's not like that. In Asia, it's very normal to have a fortune told,
Hmm.
and it's just part of the culture. And so nobody really bats an eyelash if you're going to go get a fortune. And it's just sort of, well, yeah, of course, and so it doesn't have this sort of stigma. Whereas in the West, we have this history of rationality and logic and things. And so, the scientific method
Yeah.
and so forth. And it's very much, if I can't understand it, it couldn't possibly exist or be real or be true, and that's just the basic starting position. So they start off with their decision closed,
Absolutely, and
and then
the
you have to
flavor
open
you
them
have.
up, and that could be too much effort.
Do you remember this movie, The Big Fish? Uh,
I
the
didn't see it.
idea is from Tim Burton. The idea is that this is the relationship between a father and the son. The father is very kind of lives in a fantasy world, and the son is very down to earth. And when his father talks about different stories, the son wants to, well, tell me the real thing, and he said, the real is the real, but you lose the flavor. And I think that I do many things for the sake of the flavor. Even if I can be very crude in order to paint a possible situation, because this is something that we usually do as astrologers. We paint possible situations given certain information that we have of how time is moving to this place or another.
Yeah, well, our life is a story,
Mm-hmm.
and then so if you say something in a compelling way, it has more of an effect, and could be arguably more useful. Whereas some people, if you just tell them just the facts, well, they don't know what to do with the facts because there's no context. And so
Exactly.
if you
Love
place the facts into a context, there's sort of a beginning, a middle, and an end. People can follow the arc of a story much better than they can just follow a list. You try reading a spreadsheet versus a novel. You tell me
it.
when do you get tired first? Which one makes you tired first? And
Yeah.
to be honest, there are some people they prefer the spreadsheet, and they're just like that. And those are those people. But in my case, the novel is much easier for me to digest. I can digest a lot of information if it's in novel form. If it's in a story, and especially for me, I can listen really well.
Good. Good.
Okay, so now we've got a little bit of your history in terms of the astrology, and then of course studying with the Mayan stuff, and we kind of understand that you've been doing this for almost 20 years now. 18 years is a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And so you mentioned that you studied law. So that's your job? You work in the law? Is that sort of, I didn't
Well,
actually know that.
that was not the definite step. That was also another step in my career before entering the foreign service. I work as a diplomat, in fact. I have this, obviously, this juridical and this legal background helps me in the way in for instance, right now I'm working on a unit and a negotiation department, but this is a part of the job as a diplomat. You have to sometimes wear many hats. Sometimes I've been posted in Germany. I've lived for about 5 years there. I worked as a consul there. I worked in different areas of an embassy. Embassies have different departments. I worked in a cooperation department. I worked in a consular department. So and even did some press. So many different things. But my profession would be that a lawyer.
I see. I didn't know that you were a lawyer. I knew that you were a diplomat, but I didn't know that your background was through law. And so that actually, to me, adds a very interesting layer to your personality, because that you're the novel of Khan is this advocate, and then so here you are. I don't know if you're a professional advocate, but at least you're a trained advocate. You have the training or the background, of doing legal work. That's hilarious. Khan is a perfect lawyer, and then also you know, especially if you're in disagreement.
You know that,
Yeah, you represent me. Go. Here's the money.
in this sense, when I asked Fabian, you know, I have this mixture of a very peaceful Nahual and a very aggressive Nahual. This idea of
This is a fantastic. Yeah.
uh, and in this sense, that makes a lot. Being a diplomat kind of gives one thing and the other. I remember, Fabian, when you told me about Nahual Khan as being the advocate, it's something that is an aspect of myself that I always kind of feared a bit of, you know, of opposing to something or defend a certain situation. But it's true that I made amends with that, and I used it as a some sort of a chess player attitude. I still
So,
try to do it with a certain cool way of doing things, cool way of presenting things. You know, sometimes Hollywood made a huge. Sometimes you don't have to be shouting. You know, you don't have to be Tom Cruise in which one?
a
Code of
few good
Honor,
men. A
those
few good.
movies. You know, you're
A
not.
few.
Yeah,
Isn't a few good men?
objection, Your Honor. This is. It's not the
This
way
whole
it works.
courtroom's out of order. Yeah, yeah. Have
Yeah.
you ever been to court and done any of that, or no? Not at all. Not.
No. In generally in Argentina we have written process. But I've been
Sure.
in a negotiation room, and negotiation rooms tend to be kind of more intense. That is also
I
true.
was just gonna say that, like, even though a negotiation, it's not necessarily a courtroom, it's still a legal matter, and it could be very intense, especially if the
That,
parties have strong interests.
indeed,
And you represent, such and such an interest, and whatever, you can't lose.
indeed, and you have to
And
find. You have sometimes the best thing how to find elegant solutions and find integrative solutions. Sometimes this is the way the snakes also work. Try to circle around and try to get the a better understanding of things.
I always found, so you touched on this before, so I want to ask it to you. It's about um, so when as I've read many novels over the years, and many times nobody wants to be told that they have a novel con. Oh my God, no, I'm not a snake. No, no way, they'll tell you. And also death, Keme, you'll get some negative. Don't tell me that I'm Keme. Especially in the Christian cultures, Western
Mm.
cultures, you say you're a snake. The first thing they'll say to you is, "No, I'm not." Um, and so there's really people have a hard time. It's almost an insult to say that you have this novel where is for I remember, for example, my friend's wife got really upset that their baby was Khan. No, he's not, she says. uh okay. uh
You've been arguing a lot, my dear. That's what you should say. Yeah.
it's just, well, now I'm more cryptic. I'm like, oh yeah, did you guys agree really well? Hey, you guys must have just been getting on. And then they'll roll their eyes and go, yeah, and go, never mind. And so I don't need to, I need to go around, like a number three. I just go around the obstacle. I don't want to touch that with a 50-foot pole. No thanks. I've learned to just avoid such things. But anyways, you were the one person that I know who has embraced this novel the most. You even call yourself the house cobra, and sometimes you'll enter the class, you're like, ha, 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 the cobra is here, or something like that. And it always puts a smile on everyone's face. And it's,
Eh,
mm,
yes, I get along with this image of mystery. Maybe my father is a cat, but it's 12 cat and he's 13 can. in his.
He's a con too. You guys are in the con family, hey? You guys are just peas in a pod there.
So if you're can energy is something that I deeply value. If I see the other way, which novel I wouldn't like to be. Let me think. Well, I wouldn't go for the soft. Well, maybe for the too soft, the canils or those things. I would say no. Better don't put me in that bag. But still, I have a 12 canil, so I act. My canil is a very generous position. So, but the thing is, if you're a can,
I
yeah,
always thought
embrace it.
Kawak would be fun to do.
Kawok, well, Kawok.
Wouldn't that be fun to be a Kawak for a day? I think it'd be great.
I'm going to tell you something. This is something that I talked with the other with Eduardo and
Nick.
other members of the group. But
Yeah.
I've been doing some interesting inner test. I call it, well, it's like working as the pendulum test. You stand straight forward, and then you.
Oh yeah. I know this. You talked to me about this too.
Well, in this sense, I've seen that I'm Oshir Kawok, that is part of my chain of novels, mostly the whole day. Because in fact, you're not talking with a can here. I'm too open to talk to you 100% can. It would be very dense even for me to be on that vibe. This open thing that we're having a great time and we're discussing situations in my corporation would be the three Kawok, the Hun Noch, maybe if Hobby Mosh is present, but the darker novels are not here in this conversation.
Interesting. Well, I can see that in terms of the functions of the system,
Mm-hmm.
and just for people that are listening, if they don't understand this, there's the basic idea that you are a walking collection of novels. So you're not
Mm-hmm.
just one novel; you're actually a walking collection of, I don't know,
That's the way it
let's
is.
say a handful, and that's really true as you're explaining, and as you start to study more in depth, you start to understand that you're really this collection, and although we have our Kamel Bay, which is the birthday, and it's sort of the heart of the collection, the heart of the team, the
Mm-hmm.
captain maybe, there's still all these other things that are part of the system, and so in the sense I can feel all these other things, like for example, like you're saying, the pleasantries of Camille, and the excitement and intuition, and so forth, and Kawak and number three, and stuff. But whenever I talk to a can person, I always sense the presence of the Camel Bay. First of all, I'm not with you, but con people all have the same eyes. You can look in their eyes and immediately you know if they're can or not.
Mira.
They have a can. Have you ever noticed that?
No. I don't have many canned friends. In fact, I don't.
You always chase them off. Actually, yes, a couple of days ago in my neighborhood, I saw two snakes just squaring each other off. It was so fun. They were quite big, and they were just sort of staring at each other, inching towards either they were going to make love or they were going to fight. I wasn't sure, but they were, anyways, it would look very intense. And I sat and watched for like 20 minutes. It was pretty cool. Um, but yeah, anyways, can people, that one of their telltale things, because for me, I'm always wondering if it's the day before or the day after. I'm never, my uncertain nature is always like, yeah, well, it's 80% is this, but there's a 20% chance it could be that or that, and so
Mhm.
that door is not closed always for me. And that's just kind of part of my perspective on stuff. And what was I going to say? Yeah, the can
No,
people all have these. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
what you're opening about this is something that I'm really kind of understanding in this this time that we are the deep idea of the corporation is something that I couldn't understand before. This is something that is getting clearer these days for me. And I see it, for instance, right now, the way I'm talking, I'm surely another Nawal entered, because I've seen it sometimes in the tone of voice, that you go and you switch is in a very smooth way. The Nawals can be present and they can be activated or deactivated, and they shape your personality. Maybe you have 2 or 3 great, let's put it, teams. You have team A, team B, team C. Team A is present 60% of the time. Team B is present, I don't know, 30% of the time. And the remaining 10% is that part of you that you don't really recognize that is you. But when they mix together, said, okay, I can feel this. In my particular situation, in case, I said, there are certain teams, I have 2 Tihash in one of the teams, let's call it. And when this 2 Tihash is present, naturally 3 Kawuk would not be present, because they tend to go to other in different directions. This is something that I've made myself. This is 100% Belehev Khan theory.
Yeah, well, basically, you're going to the edge of perception, and you're sort of trying to push beyond it, and then you're just testing. Well, how about this? Maybe it's like this, or maybe it's like that, or let's try this for a while. That's kind of how I approach ideas. It's sort of like a cup, and I pick it up and play with it for a while. And if I really like the cup, I put it in my bag. And if I don't, I just put it down and try another cup. It's almost like Indiana
And
Jones,
plus,
sort of, except for there's no
yeah,
deadly. Well, yeah, maybe there's a deadly thing of, but you know what I mean, right? Like I just pick
yeah,
up this, try this, put it down, pick up that, and whatever works, I keep.
yes,
And
you
that's
have
how I
that,
got here.
and you have plus the idea that certain Nawals get activated by certain surroundings. Nawal hula
Oh yeah.
hoop, for instance, is a groupal Nawal. It's not activated when you're not in a group situation or
I'll
in a
tell you.
group.
So I want to tell you something that's very hilarious. Um, I live in this other culture, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a very a different race of people. Like they're all one. It's a pretty ethnically homogenous group, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I very clearly, visually am an outsider.
Mm-hmm.
It's really obvious. You see a crowd of, for example, you see a crowd of 100 people. Well, you can find me really quickly. And so because of that, my main way of interacting with the world is Beleheb Tzi.
Mira, very
And
interesting.
so when I enter this other culture, Beleheb Tzi socially dominates everything. Everything is Beleheb Tzi. Nobody knows what's really going on under the surface. It's hilarious. But then when I go into uh, another place, then the other novel is there, right?
And
Because
your hula hoop A will show that you're a wanderer.
yeah,
That's they
my
say.
hula hoop, yeah, that's right. My hula hoop A is part of what got me here, and then one of my strongest novels is Oshlahu Kia, which is the mom. And so I have to spend a lot of time just sitting in the mountain or
Mm-hmm.
in next to the river. I just have to go there, and I don't need to do anything, but I just have to be there. Almost like a clocking time.
Okay.
And when I'm there, it's very much the deer is in charge of everything,
Okay.
and it's
This
like
is
it's
wonderful.
almost like it's
What you're
almost like
saying.
it's the shift in a factory. In every 8 hours,
The shift
a
in
new
the
shift
family.
comes in, right? That's an amazing idea. That's, yeah, wow, what an amazing way to think about it like that.
The shift
So
in
that,
I like that way because it's something that I've seen. For instance, as a Belichick can, anger management is part of your tasks, and I've seen that sometimes it's a good thing to be present with another narwhal, or to say to Belichick can, hey, please don't start with this right now. Say, and there are things that you can do in the way you relate yourself with this Nahual and Nahualil emotions, because they are present in that way, and they shift our perception. That's somehow one of the most interesting ways of perceiving, and this is very typical from this Mayan calendar way of understanding. This is something that I do not practice with Western astrology because it doesn't touch this side, because we're not dealing here. We are dealing with forces. This is something very special.
yeah, well, there's different ways we could describe it, but maybe you could describe one as a hammer and one as a screwdriver. And in a way, they're really not comparable. You know, there is some overlap. They're both in the toolbox. They're both tools. You know, but they
It's
really
like
are.
one is a hammer, the other is a screwdriver. I like that one.
Yeah, right. Because the Mayan calendar is a lot more screwdrivery, where it's like it really screws into you deeper, and like it's kind of unreal how deep it really goes. It goes right back to the creation moment.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just like the other astrology kind of does too, but it does it in such a huge macro thing where it's just like, imagine the sun in the sky. You're like, how far away is the sun? And they're like, it's 600 billion years away. And you're like, whoa, I can't imagine that number. My brain is, and how far is this constellation? They're like, it's 50 trillion light years. And you're like, these numbers are the sky is way too big for you to be able to put yourself in any context with. It's way out of context. And then it's interesting to ponder that there's this great outside context, which is, the size of Jupiter and all these other great things in the sky, but, your world is way more local than that. And so then,
in this sense, I think that Western astrology lost some sort of a missing link, and the Mayan calendar is still whole together. It's a unit, and in this sense, there are aspects of the magic of Mayan understanding that you can perceive them clearly, and with Western astrology, it's not exactly the same.
So I like how you said that the Western astrology lost it, and I thought that's a very fascinating thing to say, because my first thought about that is that it just doesn't have it.
I think that what they lost is some sort of the communication from general people with the divine in an astrological way. That's what I see, that the Mayan have a direct relationship with the Nahuals, and we don't have a relationship with the planets. This is the point of the missing link, and this touches, because it does, the aspect of the rituals, of the ancient grimoires, and the part of the esoteric knowledge of astrology. Now we have kind of the white book of astrology, but we need the other book in order to blend them together. But this access has been kind of lost, and that's why it remains as a half-truth, or at least as something that is not fully reuniting a person, cannot be And this is why I love some parts of the of the Mayan calendar that blends them in all together.
Wow. Yeah, I think what you said about astrology being a half truth is something that I automatically and intuitively felt ever since I first saw astrology for the first time. Is I always felt like there was something there, but I always felt like there was something not there. And it was always lead. And if you go ahead and ask the general public, I bet you most people will tell you that. That's been their experience. And you're the first person I've ever heard articulate it like that. So I think that's very profound.
Yeah, what I want to point out as a half truth is the idea that you know that there is some other part that has been broken. It's like the what's this beautiful old movie, The Dark Crystal.
I
There's
never saw it. Is it a good movie?
it's an old movie of Jim Henson with kind of Muppets, but it's a kind of a strange movie when they break a crystal. It's for kids, but not for kids, as many other things. Not for kids, but something has been broken. Astrology, Western astrology has a task to do in this sense, and this is a movement that goes to recover ancient traditions. And in the same way that Western astrology maybe has to go to the dark, Mayan calendar can go to the light a little bit more. This is how I see it,
Wow, my gosh, that's brilliant. Look at you go. I like that idea because the Mayan calendar has very much been way too in the dark. And it's
But of course, that if in your podcast and the things that are discussed in your podcast, maybe we can. I always love to discuss any of the subject. If we can talk about Mayan calendar, if a question arises about Western astrology, I can address it too as a not as a professional, as a devotee, I would say, of someone who is in this since a long time and shapes his life according to this, and also many other things.
yeah. I think a lover of astrology and of Mayan calendar or time, you know, uh, that's how I would describe you, you know. And I definitely, I know that all of us, we all look up to you a lot. And so if we have any real questions, like sometimes, for example, I'll have like a dream and I'll put it in the dream chat. I'm like, I dreamed that my arm fell off or something. Crazy dream, right?
Mm-hmm.
and different people will say their reading of the dream or their translation of the dream, and sometimes, man, all the different people say profound things, right? Like sometimes it's Josh or Jamie or all kinds of different people,
Mm-hmm.
but sometimes, yeah, when I see your response, man, it floors me, man. I have to sit down. I'm like, oh my god, that's true. Yeah, very awesome. So I know that we all look up to you in that regard, and sometimes too, you'll bring in like a Western astrology thing, which I don't study. So like, I don't know if Mercury's in retrograde or any of that stuff. But sometimes it is very relevant. Super true.
It's the only aspect that Fabian really
I know.
validates of Western astrology. If Mercury is retrograde, he leaves the now. I said, okay, but it's retrograde.
Well,
Right
I
now,
like
it's
this.
retrograde, in fact.
Well, I like this idea of the narwhals applying to the sky, right? Because the narwhals pertain to the sky. They are essentially, they are the sky. Really, we could even say the substances of the sky or something.
Mm-hmm.
And the different novels pertain to the sky so much. Like, for example, the high noon sun is Tzikin, or the sunset is Hunakpu or something. And I always thought about this idea of the different, planets and stars and other things having their novels, like bats, or not bats, but Mars, is
Where
famous.
are they? Where are those now? I see.
Do you know that bats is Mars?
Bats is Mars?
Yeah, did you not know that? Or I've heard that a lot. I mean, I can't say it's a fact or anything, but I've heard that for forever. It's the
Makes a
red.
lot of sense that if bats were Mars.
It's check this out. This is the most poetic way of explaining it. It's many different elements, because Mars is complex archetype, right? And so is bats. But the most poetic one is that it's a red thread.
Mira.
And it gets woven through the whole thing. And it's so true. And you just watch where's the red thread in the sky? And you look at it, there it is. And you just watch it.
Yeah, it makes sense that if Mars is bats, it's Mars, and Western astrology starts with Aries, is ruled by Mars. Here you have a connection point.
Well, that's
we have a nice subject to we can see if we can get some extra data. Maybe we can interweave some connections.
That's fascinating. Okay, let's land the plane. It's been just absolutely great talking to you, man. I appreciate it a lot.
Absolutely. Paul, we keep in touch.
Okay, good. Have a good night or morning, I guess.
Morning. And you have a good night.
Okay, talk to you again. Bye-bye.
Gracias. Chao, chao.